The time I taught the greatest commandment in silence. Come closer, child. I know what they did to you. I know the betrayal, the wound that still aches when no one sees. You've been told to forgive, but it feels impossible, too unfair, too painful. Yet I have come to show you a freedom deeper than your hurt. Stay with me in this story, and you will see how I turn pain into peace, chains into release, and hatred into a miracle of love. Before this video ends, you may discover the power to forgive the unforgivable and finally be free. Subscribe now and let me guide you deeper into healing and hope. My beloved friend, I have given you many words: the Sermon on the Mount, the parables of the kingdom, the promises of eternal life. But the most important lesson I ever taught, the one that defines my entire kingdom and unlocks the greatest commandment, was delivered without a single sentence of instruction. It was a lesson taught in silence, communicated not through the ear, but through the humiliation of the heart. The world believes the greatest commandment is found in eloquent speech, monumental theology, or grand declarations of faith. But I tell you that the true test of your love for God and your love for man is found in the low places, the dusty, unnoticed corners of life where true service resides. This is the story of the Last Supper, not of the bread and the wine, but of the towel and the basin. The upper room in Jerusalem was quiet, warm, and ready for the Passover feast. It was the night before my crucifixion, a night heavy with prophecy and finality. But my disciples, my chosen 12, were oblivious to the immense spiritual gravity of the moment. They were preoccupied with something far more ordinary and tragically human: pride. We gathered at the low U-shaped table, reclining on the couches as was the custom. Yet as they settled in, a deep, pervasive awkwardness settled over the room. The ritual was incomplete. According to the standard hospitality of the time, the moment we entered, a servant should have been there to perform the lowliest task, washing the thick dust from our road-worn feet. But there was no servant, and worse, none of my 12 friends would volunteer. They were all apostles in training, future pillars of the church. Their minds were not on towels, they were on thrones. Just moments earlier, they had been engaged in a heated, whispered argument on the path to the room, a petty, tragic feud over which of them should be considered the greatest. Luke 22:24. This was their ordinary life, a constant low-level competition for status and recognition. Each man looked at the other and saw a rival for a high seat in the coming kingdom. Peter saw Andrew as too quiet. James and John saw the other 10 as unworthy of the special access they enjoyed. They were still defining greatness by the size of their titles and the height of their position. As they reclined, their unwashed feet hung in the air, a constant, disgusting reminder of the neglected duty. The dust was thick and caked with the filth of the cobblestones and the manure of the street. Every one of them saw the basin of water, the towel, and the need. But the silent internal monologue of pride paralyzed their hands. I am an apostle. I have healed the sick, cast out demons, and walked on water. I will not stoop to perform the work of a household slave. That is beneath my dignity. Let John do it. He's the youngest. Better yet, let Peter do it. He's always boasting. Let him humble himself first. They waited for a celestial sign, a thunderous command, or a final definitive list of ranks. They were ready to fight Rome. They were ready to argue theology. They were ready to die for me. But they were not ready to serve the man next to them in a way that cost them their prestige. The greatest commandment, love for God and love for neighbor, was forgotten because their hearts were saturated with the poison of self. Their ordinary lives, for all their grand potential, were choked by the silent demand for status. They had the power, the spiritual authority, and the towel right there, but they had not the will. And in that atmosphere of self-importance, I knew no verbal command could penetrate. I needed to speak to their hearts in a language they couldn't ignore. Refrain of encouragement. My friend, look at your own ordinary life. Where is the dirty task you refuse to touch? Where is the humiliation you avoid? Pride is the only barrier to my grace. Until you are willing to lower yourself, you will never see the kingdom clearly. The greatness you seek is not up, it is down. Give me the towel of your humility. The Passover meal commenced. We began the ritualized blessings over the cup and the bread, the sacred, heavy words of the ancient covenant. Yet the air was still thick with the unspoken shame of the unwashed feet. The wine tasted bittersweet. The bread felt dry. Every disciple knew they were participating in the most solemn ritual of the year, while simultaneously committing an act of gross discourtesy. The crack deepened as they realized the full implications of their refusal. It was more than just a matter of hospitality. It was a crisis of leadership. The one who washes the feet is the lowest, the servant. But in my kingdom, the greatest is the servant of all. Mark 9:35. By refusing to act, they were silently declaring, I refuse to be the greatest. I refuse to be the lowest. The crack of realization was not external, it was internal. Each disciple, avoiding the gaze of the others, began to feel the heavy weight of their own self-entitlement. They were supposed to be my closest friends, the ones who understood my teachings on humility and service, yet they were behaving worse than the heathen rulers I had warned them against. Matthew 20:25-26. They started to rationalize the situation, building walls of justification in their minds. It's too late now. If I start washing feet, I will only expose everyone else's selfishness. That would make me look self-righteous, which is just another form of pride. Therefore, true humility is to let the awkward moment pass and hope the master doesn't notice. But I noticed everything. I saw the way their toes curled in shame, trying to hide the filth beneath the table. I saw the quick, contemptuous glances they cast at each other, silently blaming their neighbor for the inaction that was mutually consented pride. The crack was the widening gap between their vocation, apostle, fisher of men, ambassador of the kingdom, and their behavior, petty, self-serving politicians. They were proclaiming the arrival of the kingdom of heaven, while their feet remained caked in the dust of the world, and their hearts remained trapped in the dirt of ambition. I allowed the crack to widen. I let them sit in the profound, humiliating silence, listening only to the chewing of the Passover lamb and the heavy beating of their own hearts. I knew that the greatest commandment, to love me with all their being and to love their neighbor as themselves, could not be taught with the usual sermon. It required a surgical intervention, a shock to their system so profound that it would redefine their understanding of power forever. The silence was the scalpel that exposed the sickness of their pride. Refrain of encouragement. My friend, what silence are you currently enduring? What is the unacknowledged duty, the unspoken fault, the silent rivalry in your own life? The silence of shame is my invitation to confession. I'm not waiting for you to fix it. I'm waiting for you to admit your helplessness so I can step into your mess and perform the cleansing that only I can provide. Let the crack open. Revelation is coming. The time for waiting for silent teaching was over. The feigned indifference of the disciples was about to meet the absolute devotion of the Son of Man. The atmosphere, already tense with the knowledge of betrayal, John 13:2, suddenly froze. I rose from the table. This was the breaking point. It was not the command to wash feet, but the act itself that shattered their spiritual framework. My movement was deliberate, slow, and utterly silent. There was no need for words. The action spoke a language far louder than any trumpet. The first act was profound. I laid aside my outer garments, John 13:4. My friend, this was not just removing a coat for convenience. It was a divine pantomime of my entire mission. In heaven, I laid aside my equality with God, Philippians 2:6. Here, I laid aside the dignity of the rabbi and the authority of the master. I stripped away every external layer of power, status, and prestige. I became, literally and visibly, indistinguishable from the lowest slave in the household. The disciples watched, petrified. Their eyes, previously avoiding the truth, were now riveted in horrified awe. What is he doing? He is the Messiah. He is the Son of God. Does he intend to perform the duty we, his followers, refused? This is intolerable humiliation. Their shame was now public, magnified tenfold by the contrast of my divine humility. I took the basin and poured the water. The sound of the water sloshing, the simple common sound of service, echoed in the vast, shocked silence of the room. I took the towel and fastened it around my waist. The towel, the emblem of utter servitude, became in that moment the greatest vestment of priesthood in the history of the world. Then I knelt. Think of this, my friend. The one who created the oceans, who set the stars in the sky, who spoke the cosmos into existence, he knelt down before the dirty, calloused, self-important feet of his friends. The master lowered himself to the position of the mud-splattered slave. This descent was the absolute breaking point of all human expectation regarding power, authority, and love. It fundamentally redefined the greatest commandment from a theological principle to a visible, tangible act of surrender. Love God. I loved God by obeying the Father and embracing the lowest role. Love your neighbor. I loved them by touching their shame and cleansing their filth. The silence was the most powerful component of the lesson. It forced them to confront their own pride without the distraction of a sermon. The shame was suffocating, yet the love in my touch was undeniable. They felt the heat of my hand and the coldness of the water, and in that physical act, they felt the conviction of the Holy Spirit revealing the darkness of their ambitious hearts. The distance between the king and the servant had collapsed entirely. Refrain of encouragement. My friend, where is your breaking point? Where is the moment you must choose between your ego and your love? I came to show you that the highest seat of power is found kneeling in service. Stop fearing humiliation. That moment of public surrender is the only thing that can truly break the chains of pride that hold you back from true, powerful love. The silent washing began. I approached the feet of the first disciple, likely John, who was reclining next to me. I took his foot, encrusted with the day's journey, and began the meticulous, humiliating work. The only sound was the gentle friction of the towel against the skin, the faint ripple of the water, and the strained, heavy breathing of the 12. But when I reached Peter, the shift became verbal, a dramatic, emotional protest that mirrored the inner conflict of every soul in the room. Peter, the man of impulsive passion and profound loyalty, could not endure the humiliation. He shot up from his couch, pulling his feet away from the basin. "Lord, are you washing my feet?" John 13:6. His tone was a mixture of shame, disbelief, and outright refusal. He was shouting the question everyone else was silently asking. "Master, you cannot do this. This is beneath you. If you do this, you erase every line of authority and dignity." Peter, in his prideful protection of my status, was actually seeking to elevate his own comfort. He wanted a master who stayed untouchable on a throne, because that meant Peter could still aspire to a throne too. A master who kneels means all disciples must kneel. My reply was gentle, yet firm, correcting the fundamental spiritual blindness in his heart. "What I am doing you do not understand now, but you will know after this." John 13:7. This was the core of the shift. The truth of the kingdom is often understood only after the act of humble obedience. Peter wanted to understand the reason before submitting to the action. I taught him that service precedes understanding. Peter's protest escalated. "You shall never wash my feet." John 13:8. His refusal was a refusal of the greatest commandment in its active form. It was a rejection of the humility I was modeling. I gave him the ultimate ultimatum, connecting the physical act to eternal salvation. If I do not wash you, you have no part with me." Peter's immediate panicked reversal, "Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head," was a beautiful, albeit chaotic moment of realization. He still grasped for an elaborate total cleansing, but he finally accepted the essential necessity of the Master's service. The cleansing continued, person by person, foot by foot. I even knelt before the feet of Judas Iscariot, the man who was even then clutching the 30 pieces of silver that represented my betrayal. I washed the feet that would, in hours, carry him to the garden to deliver the kiss of death. My friend, this was the ultimate expression of the greatest commandment taught in silence. Love your enemy. I demonstrated unconditional love and service not only to my loyal friends, but to the one who had already sold me. I did not skip him. I did not expose his guilt. I served him in the full knowledge of his hatred, proving that my love is utterly unconditional and indiscriminate. This silent service was the purest form of love the world has ever witnessed. The shift transformed the meaning of the room. It went from a place of rivalry to a sacrament of service. The disciples were now ready to hear the words because their hearts had been prepared by the water and the towel. Refrain of encouragement. My friend, the truest cleansing is often resisted. Where are you trying to protect your dignity from my service? Do not let your pride disqualify you from my love. If you accept my cleansing, you are clean. If you accept my example, you are free. Let me wash the shame from your heart and the dust from your journey. After the silent work was finished, I rose, dried my hands, and quietly resumed my outer garment. The profound message had been delivered physically. Only then, once they were seated and their shame had settled into deep reflection, did I break the silence with the verbal purpose of the act. "Do you know what I have done to you?" John 13:12. This question was not a query, it was an interrogation of their spirit. Did they understand the revolutionary nature of the scene they had just witnessed? Did they see that the towel was more powerful than the sword? I then gave them the command, the purpose, that would define their mission and the very character of my church for all time. "You call me teacher and Lord, and you say, well, for so I am. If I then, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you." John 13:15. The purpose was twofold. 1. The definition of authority. I established that true authority in the kingdom is not about being served, but about serving. The highest title, Lord and Master, is intrinsically linked to the lowest task, foot washing. This shattered the hierarchy they were fighting over. 2. The embodiment of the greatest commandment. This simple act perfectly encapsulated the two great commandments. Love God. By performing the act of the lowest servant, I displayed absolute humility and obedience to the Father's will, prioritizing his kingdom values over my human dignity. Love neighbor. By physically cleansing the dirt and shame from their feet, I displayed unconditional, practical love for my disciples, meeting their most basic, humbling need. The silent teaching was designed to ensure that this commandment could never again be relegated to a theological debate. It became a visible, repeatable liturgy of love. They could never again argue about who was the greatest, because the memory of their master kneeling before them, the wet towel, the warm water, the shocked silence, would forever be etched into their soul. This silent command was designed to prevent the church from becoming just another institution run by proud, self-serving leaders. Every time a follower chooses the towel over the crown, they are repeating my silent sermon. They are declaring that power is service and that love is practical. The true measure of a Christian is not how high they can climb, but how low they are willing to descend for the sake of their brother or sister. The highest form of worship is often the act that brings the greatest humiliation to your pride. Refrain of encouragement. My friend, do you wish to be truly great? Then find your towel. The greatest commandment is not a feeling, it is a posture. Stop searching for opportunities to shine and start seeking opportunities to serve. The Father watches for the one who chooses the low place, for that is where true exaltation begins. The final enduring impact of my silent lesson is this: the world should know you are mine by the towel you wear. I gave you a new commandment later that night. A new commandment I give to you, that you love one another. As I have loved you, that you also love one another. By this, all will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. John 13:34-35. How did I love you? I loved you in silence, through service, and in humility. The impact of the washing of the feet is that it makes love tangible, costly, and inescapable. It strips away all pretense of spiritual superiority and demands that every believer identify with the lowest position. To the busy achiever, your endless effort, your self-reliance, and your refusal to ask for help are often just hidden forms of the Pharisee's pride. You are afraid to kneel because you are afraid to look weak. I call you to find the towel, to serve, and to be served, allowing your brother or sister to meet your need, which is an equally humbling act of love. To the wounded heart, the greatest freedom from your pain comes when you stop obsessing over the injury done to you and start focusing on the injury you can heal in others. The pain you carry is often the exact tool you need to understand and serve someone else's brokenness. Exchange your pain for a towel and watch bitterness turn into balm. The world is still obsessed with who is greatest. It is still fighting over status, titles, and who gets served first. But my kingdom operates on the principle of the towel. When you serve in silence, without seeking recognition or applause, you are fulfilling the greatest command without uttering a word. You become a living sermon, an undeniable proof of my presence, and a true ambassador of the love that descended from heaven to kneel in the dust. Be known not by your sermons, but by your service. Be known not by your status, but by your selflessness. Be known not by your titles, but by your towel. That silent, humble, devoted love is the language that moves mountains and moves the heart of the Father. You have walked with me through this story and felt the weight of forgiveness lift. This freedom is what I came to give. Do not let bitterness hold you one more day. Walk with me. Keep learning to live free and whole. Subscribe and stay close. Each story I tell will guide you deeper into healing and hope. You are loved, you are seen, and you are never alone.